Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands, Quindy and Justin, and sometimes even a John. How are y'all doing? Palette, at least, at the ready. I remembered it at the last minute. No coffee. Hello, Dwarving. Hello, everybody. How's it going? It is one of those mornings. It was a very, very windy night here last night. All of the internet in the entire Bay Area went out for over an hour. The howls of frustration from Silicon Valley were not to be believed. For me, highly entertaining. I'm like, yay, I get to go to bed early. Oh, but it was interesting. David looked at like the outage, and there was just like this giant red spot, a giant red spot over the Bay Area. It's funny. Funny for me. Not so funny for all of those computer geeks that were denied their evening dose of streaming or gaming. But yes. Hello, everyone. We have a Gnoll. Poof! It's a Gnoll. Ha! It was. I think it was weather related. I think something went down because of all the wind was crazy last night, like crazy. I've never seen so much wind here. So it was like storm front coming through, I think. But you broke a bust. Oh noes, Julia. Hopefully it was not like a super awesome bust. I just got a bust yesterday. I got the new Big Child bust, the Elven Archer female. She's very pretty. Very, very pretty. I should have brought her to show you, but most of you have already seen. Hey, Sentimental, long time no see. Yeah, total sad, total cry. All right, guys. Input. What color is his sash or pants? Let's do pants and sash today. Then we'll go back to his fur. But I feel like we can start blocking in some other colors so that we can get an idea of where we are. Oh, I printed a bit wrong. Well, I mean, maybe this is the universe saying, hey, print, reprint and get yourself a really good print. Like, I need, like, light, dark. Okay, and, like, let's start with pants. Light or dark? Pants, red and white stripes. Okay. Polished bone with light blue stripe. Some people want dark. Everybody wants stripes. Okay. Okay, so we've agreed on stripes. I am resetting everything, Grey Wolf. I am resetting everything. So, okay, we've got stripes. I'm going to reserve the right to make one of the stripe colors black or cream. What is the other color? What is the other color to go on the pants with the stripes? I need a color. What do you want? I've seen everything from red to purple to blue bandied about in the chat, so I need you guys to commit. Purple limits our choices. I'm actually kind of sliding away from purple, but we've got red, indigo. We got a lot of purple, red, and indigo, huh? Let's see here. Yeah, we could probably make it work with purple or red. I think I'd rather do red for the sash. Because remember, the sash is a different color. So maybe we do red for the sash and maybe like, maybe a darker purple. Or we can go blue or indigo. Indigo's not a bad call, actually. We could go with Night Sky Indigo. Night Sky Indigo with red sash. What do you guys think of that idea? We could use Kraken ink to maybe shade the indigo parts. And then we can go in and add stripes. Lots of people think the red sash works. Okay. All right, we'll do that. I like using Night Sky Indigo anyway because it's a color a lot of people don't buy, but it's really pretty. And it is close enough to purple to be purple if you don't put any other purple on the model. This is Night Sky Indigo is the base for Halfling's pants and cape, guys. Like, that's Night Sky Indigo. This is why you should buy this color, because it's really, really pretty. Depending on what you highlight it with, you can get a lot of different effects, because the hood and the pants are the same base color. It's just then I'm using the Night Sky as a highlight up here, and I'm using it as a midtone to shadow down here. So this is how you can take one color that's in the middle of things, and you can really use it twice, but you can make it look like two different things on the model if you highlight it and shade it differently. This is why colors in the middle, colors that are around the 5 to 6 on the light to dark scale, are very versatile. So if you don't own this color, buy it. Because if you didn't hear, for those who didn't hear yesterday's announcement, that Ed told me to tell you, is that he's thinking of consolidating the core and the bones lines into one. And he did not give me a time frame, and he did not give me particulars about whether there would be cancellations. But what I am telling all of you is that you cannot depend on your colors being around if they are really kind of niche colors. So things like Night Sky Indigo, buy it. Otherwise, it might not be here. And Reaper will gladly make you a batch of everything. Nothing is canceled forever. If you want 10 bottles of X or Y or Z, you can absolutely. You're going to pay a premium for them, but you can get them. So be aware, prepare. If you have favorite colors, I would recommend that maybe right around the holiday season is a good time to get some extras. The good thing about this is that we're being given advance notice that this will happen, so. Which we did not get before. So let us be grateful. And if there's a color that you love that you use all the time, think about picking up an extra bottle. Remember, each bottle of Master Series has like 400 drops of paint in it, and as long as you shake it every couple of years, it'll stay good for over a decade. So you're unlikely to run out unless you're painting like big armies based around one color. And in that case, you should just pick up more bottles. But yeah, we really don't know how it's all going to come out and or when it's going to happen. It'll happen when Ed has time. Or when he makes it a priority, when he decides now is the time I need to do this. So. All right, we're going to see how this works. Looking at it, I think that it might be kind of off with his color. It might be a little bit wrong, but we'll see. It's not going to look great, I'll tell you that, to start out with. So we're going to have to tune it. And that's good because this gives you guys a chance to see how when I pick a color and it's just not working great, it's possible to tune that color to figure out how to make it work. Because although this is not a bad choice, it is not the best choice either. Right now, part of the reason that it is fighting, to give you an idea, is that it is not really lighter or darker than the skin tone. So even though we have a different color, which does provide contrast, it's not as pleasing as it would be if it were a much darker color or a much lighter color. So it really would benefit from being taken darker. And we may end up doing that. So this is when you've got this kind of thing where you're like, I thought this color was going to work, but it's not working for some reason. Ask yourself, is it the same shade as the other color on the model? And if I made it lighter or darker than that other color, will it work better? And the answer is almost always yes. The question then becomes, do I take it light or take it dark? And when you're dealing with kind of weird colors like we are here, where we're dealing with a a browned out yellow-green, which is definitely not your usual run-of-the-mill what you're trying to do color. Then you may want to go more conservative and go dark. Yeah, I need to get online. I'll probably get online on Friday when I have some time and order some of my favorite colors. I have to sit and take some stock, but I've got my box of paint out already, so it shouldn't take me too long to go through my colors. There are a couple of obvious ones that I don't think I grabbed before that I probably should grab. Like, I don't know that I have canary, but we'll see. Thought I had canary yellow. There. All right, and then we've got the sash. We've got a belt. I think the sash is all of that area. Yeah. All right. So the indigo is not terrible, but it could be better. So I think I am going to... Notice, though, that it does have good coverage. I mean, you could order more if you want to sentimental. Like, I think it's probably more important if you have favorites that you order an extra bottle of those. Unless, I told people yesterday, if your favorite colors are... One of your favorite colors is, like, in the main Bones line, or it's in the first 54 colors or 108 colors of the Master Series regular line, you're probably pretty safe. A lot of the colors that don't sell well are much later in the Master Series line because they don't, either with the Kickstarter colors, they don't fit on a rack, so they don't go to stores at all, or they are so far down on the rack that people just don't look at them. Weird Shadow Raven. Alrighty, so while that dries, I'm going to figure out what I want to do for what's a better call. I'm going to be going red. Now, okay, so here's our question mark. We are at the point where we're like, all right, we could shade these down with a darker color, and that will make them a darker, go darker, and maybe they will work better with Mr. Gnoll then. But do we use a purple or do we use a violet, blue-violet, like Death Knight, or do we use a blue? You could go either way. When you've got a mixed color like this, which is blue and violet, blue and purple, you can go blue, you can go purple, or you can go somewhere in between. And what you have to think of at that point is stop and think, how is it going to relate to the stuff that's right next to it? Our leather is probably going to be, either a neutral or a yellow-orange, because we'll either have to go light with our leather for contrast, or we'll have to go really dark with our leather for contrast, depending on what we do with this red sash. So, given that, the leather is probably not going to fight with anything. But the sash is going to be red, and if we push this color closer to purple, they are going to start to fight. Unless we take the red like really light and bright and more orange, and take it kind of just out of the way of that red. Because remember, you have to think about it in relation to the color wheel when you are choosing stuff. And this even counts with your shadows and stuff, like we're talking about on these pants. Like, because when I have to shift this color, this indigo color, when I have to shift this, I have to choose, because it's probably right around here. And I have to choose whether to shift it more blue or to shift it more red. Right? More toward a reddish purple or more toward a blue when I do take it darker. And if I shift it more this way, it's getting closer to this, which is what we already said we wanted to do with the sash. So if that happens, if I take that route, I'm going to have to push my sash further orange because I'm going to have to push it away. Can you see that? You're always trying not to put colors closer together on the color wheel. When you do that, you get clashing colors. The only way to do that and succeed with it is if you take one of those colors really, really dark and the other one like brighter light. So like, I just was helping somebody who was doing a project that was a water critter and they were using green and blue-green, and they couldn't understand why every time they tried to bring in more teal, they ended up painting over it because it just wasn't working. And the reason is that all those colors are sitting right here, and they're going to clash unless she takes her blue-green, like really dark, and her other green up toward yellow. Then she can push them apart on the color wheel. But having everything be in this tonal range with just this one a little bit lighter and this one maybe, you know, around a medium, they're going to fight. They're going to absolutely fight. So remember these things. These color wheels are like $1.99. Seriously, they are even with today's inflation, they are probably no more than $2.29. And you can get them on Amazon, or you can go to an art store. Almost every art store should have a color wheel, and they'll usually have one of these pocket ones. You probably could even get these at Hobby Lobby. Don't quote me on that, but I wouldn't be surprised. But they are super easy to get. This is actually a Scale 75 branded one that I got from one of their Kickstarters. But I also have just a generic one, and I have a giant one. But you can also just remember the order of colors. If you can remember the rainbow order of colors and kind of wrap it around on itself so that it makes a circle, I mean, just make your own color wheel. If you're really broke, just grab a piece of watercolor paper and sketch one out. I did back in the day. I did one for one of our color wheel $5 Patreon things. So to show people which colors were closest to the various points on a color wheel in Master Series. There's no excuse. There's no excuse for not having some sort of half-assed sketched in color wheel, just to keep yourself from getting in trouble. So the answer here then, the obvious answer for me is to go dark blue with the shadows on this Night Sky Indigo. And that way we can make this sash nice and red and bloody red without having to change it. All right, which is kind of sad because I kind of wanted to go Urgathoa for that sash, but it's just not going to work this time. So let's see here. I need a nice dark blue. Where's my Ritterlich? I don't want Void. I want Ritterlich. There's our nice dark blue. And maybe some blue liner. Could even use Nightmare Black. Nightmare Black might be good. Well, no. Nightmare Black is really vivid. That's the problem. Blue liner might be a better choice. Maybe a mixture of Ritterlich and blue liner. I think I'll do that. I think I'll do 2 and 2 Ritterlich blue and blue liner. And I'll use that to shade these pants. Alrighty. I love Ritterlich blue, and that is a color that I should probably get a couple extra bottles of. This is our answer for Prussian Blue. For artist colors, if you're familiar with Prussian Blue, it's one of my favorite blues. Probably my ultimate favorite blue in artist tube paints. Ooh, it is definitely cloggy though. I'm gonna have to use my pokey tool pretty darn determinedly here. Yeah, it is stuck. So when you run into that, where it's really stuck, don't push that dried paint back through. Decide to just get your fingers a little dirty and take off the nipple top. Kind of scrape around in there. Kind of find that clog of paint if you can, or at least figure out where the aperture is. And come at it from the opposite direction. And that will push a big chunk of paint, that big glob of paint, out into that. Which keeps it from going down in your paint bottle and becoming a problem later on when it wants to clog the aperture. Usually if it's just a little bit of resistance, I just push it through. But when it's really got a nice big glob of paint in there, like that one did, this big chunk, I don't want that in my bottle. So I'll get my fingers a little dirty instead and turn this around so that I can clear it for good. Yeah, if you really like Prussian Blue, Ritterlich is the closest thing we've got. I really love Ritterlich Blue. Alrighty, now we'll do 2 drops of that, 2 drops of blue liner. I should probably shake my liner up extremely because they tend to, I want to make sure I get a good solid coat I want to also kind of wash my fingertips a little bit. I don't mind having a little paint on my fingers, but having big globs on it is annoying. There. Much better. But yeah, both of these colors are among my favorites. Blue Liner and Reaperlive Blue are both. I love dark blues, so. Which is funny because David pointed out that I don't do the primary color triad. My favorite color schemes are going to be in the orange, purple, green range. And his are opposite. He prefers red, yellow, blue. So we're totally opposing on that, which is funny. I always am bemused because there's so many things we have in common, but then on the fundamental details we differ. All right, let's get that together. Now remember the rule or the trick for making things go better together is to put a brush full of one into the other. Even though that's not very much and it's not a lot of shift, it still is putting a little bit of that Night Sky Indigo into that blue color, which is going to help them work together. If you want to, you can do even a little bit more. It's not ever going to overpower the blue because these are made with a high solids blue base, and there's a lot of blue pigment in these colors, or at least in the Reaperlive. But it will make these a little bit closer. It'll make them work a little bit better to shade or highlight each other. But yeah, Reaperlive Blue 9115, one of the most underrated colors in the line. And underrated colors could be in danger, so buy them. Cyan Blue is another one, 9117. 9115 and 9117. Buy those colors. Buy these colors because this is one of the best coverage medium blues we've got. And it's a great primary blue. So yes, go there. Go that direction. I'm going to thin this blue down quite a bit because I want to shade with it. So I do want it to be a little bit more translucent than it is. Get my mixing brush out. I did not get time to make my autumn spice cookies last night. I am totally motivated to get them done tonight. I want cookies. It's cookie season. And I think I'm going to make them with some actual pumpkin in them, which will make them soft and not a hard sugar cookie. I kind of like softer cookies anyway. They're a brown sugar cookie recipe that I adapt. They tend to be a little softer when I make them anyway, because I make them with almond flour, and some other gluten-free flours. So do keep your original color out so that you can kind of do some wet blending or otherwise blending to make these two colors work together. But bring in that dark blue, of course, on the interior of the leg. There's going to be a lot more shadow. So bringing that in there. The underside or butt of the Gnoll should get dark. And the more of this blue you put on here, the more the color of the pants as your eye perceives it will shift toward blue. The more surface you cover up. So if you want kind of an equal shift toward the blue, then go at least 40%. Like maybe if you go 50-50, then you're probably going to end up with the pants shifting very much toward blue, because once we build a highlight in there, we'll have covered up a lot of our midtone. And this brings me to a common problem when people start to highlight, is that a lot of people absolutely lose their midtone. Oh, shortbread. Nice. Hey, it's fall cookies. It's fall cookie season. Fall is totally cookie season. Fall and winter. Haha. Yeah, biscuits. We're currently in Biscuit Week, watching the new Great British Baking Show season. Of course, we could not stream last night because of the internet being out, so we could not continue to watch Biscuit Week, but that's all right. I'm kind of fine. Since the whole season isn't out yet, I'm fine going slow. I love my Bake Off, and I'm always sad when it's over, so. We tend to watch stuff at night together before we go to bed, and that's one of our things we love when it comes out with a new season. Yeah, biscuits are good. I've never been a person who dipped stuff in their coffee or tea, though. Like, I've done it, but it's never just been one of my things. All right, so I made a lot of the interior of that like dark blue because we've got that sash over there, and it kind of gets in the way of the light. You can see how it covers the leg. So that means this area is going to be pretty dark. Yeah, he's really cool. We like Jurgen too. We like the Italian guy too, and we like the Indian lady, and I think those are our favorites. But I think I like the crew this year. It's gonna actually be hard because there are a lot of people to like, and then you're gonna be sad when they go home. So really, but it is fun. It's super fun. I love Bake Off. I should whip off. I've got their baking book. I should like make something from it in honor of Bake Off. There is a shortbread, a chocolate dipped shortbread in their cookie that I really like. So maybe I will have to make that. But first the pumpkin spice cookies, because nom. Chocolate and coffee are your favorite? Yeah. Yeah, they're all really nice people. I agree, Carnico. It is a really good crew on this season of the show. When you wet blend, you're going to kind of shift everything like kind of into this middle zone where it's not quite your first color and not quite your second color. So you may find that you have to go back and kind of touch it up stronger if you don't want that. Like if you think there's supposed to be some highlight there and you don't want to lose that, you're going to have to go back and touch it up. But on the underside of the leg, I am going to block in a lot of this blue. And it is shifting the pants more toward blue. Yes, D-Sparrow. It is actually a yellow-green, but it's a very muted, browned-out yellow-green. So part also of the fact that this is clashing just a little bit is the fact that this color is still pretty intense. It's more intense than the fur in some ways, and so when I add highlights to this, and then when I break it up with stripes, whichever way we decide to go with stripes, that's going to help a lot too. It's going to help these pants work better with Mr. Gnoll. But yeah, it's definitely, when you're asking yourself, what is this, like, for your color scheme? Like, when you use a weird color like this for your first color, just ask yourself what it is basically. And basically, it is a green. Like, if you kind of squint at it and you kind of look at it, it says green, right? It's a yellowy green, and it's a muted yellowy green. But those are the next steps that you take. When you're using the color wheel to figure out color schemes, then what this will be is a muted yellow-green. So you know that it's a yellowy green, and you know that it's muted. So let's see what this, add black to it and see what it gives us. I wish they had an added gray. That doesn't really work. So our color that we've got here is more toward an adding red. Because a lot of our color comes close to that, but just not as much red. So it's muted, essentially. Whenever you add the complement of a thing, you will mute it. I think this is, yeah, that's about right. So it's kind of between this green and green if you added red to it. And so when you're working a color scheme then, you know, okay, I've got a yellow-green. It's a really weird yellow-green, but it is a yellow-green. And maybe it's actually kind of halfway between yellow-green and green. But then when you're dealing with color wheel, because you have those in-between steps, you can use that to kind of double check. So let's get our triadic. Let's look at our triadic here, because I always find this to be fun. So remember, you've got a primary triad of red, yellow, blue, and a secondary triad of orange, green, and purple, right? But you also have triads with these little in-between colors. So if we go to our yellow-green, and we line up the triangle, the big triangle, which is the triadic, we see that actually the other point of it, this other point of it, actually goes to blue-violet. So we know then that the color we chose here is perfect. It will go with our yellow-green. But so that means that if it's not working as well as we want it, that means it's entirely a matter of light or dark or muted. So we have to either take it darker or we have to take it more muted, maybe both, or we take it lighter and more muted. So that's how you know, like, okay, the blue-violet was the right call here, but it's still not working as good as I would like it. So I need more contrast somehow. Or if I'm using a bright color next to a muted color, or a brighter color next to a muted color, that can be part of the problem as well. So the other one, by the way, is red-orange, which means that when we take this sash red, we probably should highlight it with orange or a washed-out coral color, because then we'll be using exactly a triadic scheme per the color wheel. We'll be using exactly the correct colors. Doesn't mean we can't shade it with a little bit of the red with a little bit more of a red-violet if we want, but we should keep it more firmly in the orangey red kind of sphere if we want a pure triad. You don't have to. We could go more red with just a little bit of a hint of orange, and it would probably still work. Oh, deal with it, Val. You might hate color theory, but I need to educate people who actually want to learn about color theory. So you can just go la la la, listen to a song. Put your podcast on. Maybe I should just preface it. Every time I talk about color theory, I should preface it. But this is a heavy color theory stream because we're choosing colors for the Gnoll and we are adjusting the colors. So we're talking less about mechanical techniques and more about theory. So I'm going to get these folds, get a bit of blue in there, get a bit of a shadow underneath the sash because there would be a dark line there. I'm probably going to come in with blue liner and line everything. But yeah, so long story short, yes, your first and your main color on this Gnoll is the yellow-green. But remember the muted versus bright rule, which is if you're going to mute something, you've got to mute everything at least a little bit, or it's going to start to clash with each other. So that's part of what we could be getting here, is that our yellow-green is maybe a little bit more browned out than our pants are, and so it's reading a little bit off. But we'll continue working with it. I mean, just because a color, when you put it on as a base coat, doesn't work as well as you thought that it might, just means you need to tune it. It doesn't mean the color is off limits, especially if you do that color wheel check and you're like, wait, blue-violet works great with yellow-green. What's my problem here? Then it's got to be something else. It's got to be that one color is more bright and one is more muted, or it's got to be that both of them are close to the same shade and you need to take one of them lighter or darker. Those are your two. If you can remember those two color shooting steps, then you can fix anything. There. All right, so we've got some nice shadows coming in here. And I am going to do the lining because the lining is, of course, a more dramatic dark shadow. So we can take we're essentially using a pentad approach here. We're doing a 5-stage, which on 28mm I find is adequate. Like you could go with even more steps on a very big model, depending on how far apart your steps are. But on a 28, a base color with 2 highlights and 2 shadows is a pretty good, like that's going to give you a very nice blended effect. Or if you're going with a very light color, you might have 3 shadows and 1 highlight, and vice versa if you go with a very dark color. Just going to block in some of these shadows in the folds. I mean, it's very evident from the way that Julie sculpted this one. You can see the pants are drapey. You can see exactly where the shadows need to go. Another thing we can do is really fade out the bottom of these pants, like to show that they're really ripped up and worn, and probably the color isn't very strong anymore toward the ends where they're all ripped up. So we'll work on that. We'll weather the pants as well, probably, depending on how much room I have. That can, when you start getting into that, then you got to ask if you have enough room to do it on a 28 millimeter. Because sometimes you're going to run out of room and it's not going to really carry the effect you hoped. And that's purely because you're working on a very small thing. So you have very limited room to convey ideas about the properties of an item or a surface. You just have a lot less room than you do on a big bust. Moon Glooms, I started out with a color superpower, but I don't think I would call it instinctive. I mean, there is an instinctive level to it, for sure, I think, because, but that instinct is just your natural human, like, your human brain's love of contrast. Everybody starts with that. Some people, like, get out of touch with it, I think. And then that's why they maybe overthink stuff and they don't trust their gut on color because they think they're not good at it. But I think all humans love contrast. And so everybody starts with that base. That's your instinctual level. And then people who really like colors and are attracted to them and who look at them a lot, as I did as a kid, and who maybe try to put them in groups or organize them just because they enjoy being anal, like I was. Crayons, for example. Those people end up, like, you'd think they just have a talent for it, but really they've cultivated that just because they really enjoy color. And so I feel like my color superpower wasn't, like, genetic or anything any more than anybody else starts with. But the fact that I loved colors and I would play with them constantly as a kid, and I was also doing, like, playing around with watercolor and crayons and colored pencils and everything from a very young age. So even so, though, like, I started with a good basis, but I was very primary. Like, I didn't get into muted color schemes till much later in my development. And then I had to kind of create and understand that, like, and discover that criteria of how those colors worked in relation to everything else. So I don't think that there's, like, a genetic component other than everybody loves contrast, like, subconsciously. We all do. It's humans. It's how we used to interact, how we effectively interacted with our environment from the time we were, like, you know, barely more than monkeys, if you are, or from long ago. For some reason, we are hardwired for contrast. Oh, David loves turquoise. Hold on. I just want to make sure I'm catching up with everything. I would think that a well-bred Gnoll would brush his teeth because he would want them to last longer. But that most Gnolls are not very well-bred and cultured. And that's purely because they don't have a lot of opportunities. I mean, come on, you're growing up in a... I really hate the portrayal of Gnolls in 5th edition, by the way. If you're listening, WotC, like, give me my Gnoll culture back and stop making them mindless demonic servants. I'm just really not into it. Just telling you, WotC. I'm just telling you. Ah, dear. Chocolate coffee. Yeah, so kind of like mocha-y. Mocha-y. Base color, then wet blended darker, then purely darker. I do that on this stream. Odi Lodi. I do that on this stream a lot. I do wet blending because it's faster. And I'm trying usually to make progress on the stream. When I do my own stuff, then I tend to take a lot more time and layer. So, like, on her pants, there's not wet blending. There's just me layering in the highlights and shadows mostly because if I want to introduce texture, then wet blending is not going to give me texture. Only layering will give me texture. So if I want to do the tiny little cloth texture, the really fine... Will it even show up on camera? Yeah. So it's not showing up very well. It's much finer than it's looking, but you can see the suggestion of the texture here. You got to do that with layering. You can't do it with wet blends. So So when I'm doing my own work, I tend to go a lot slower and I tend to use a lot more layering unless I'm just blocking in light and shadow. If I'm blocking in light and shadow, then I am going to go fast and probably wet blend, and then I'll go back and layer in texture with highlighting. But on this stream, often if I'm trying to just kind of move quickly and get stuff blocked in so that we can, move along on the figure, I use a lot of wet blending. And it's funny because I never realized I did until I really stopped to analyze what I do. But yeah, so you could do a wet blend, or you could just like do kind of block in that darker color and then do some layering to blend it. It's up to you. But I'm using a 5-stage, which is what I kind of call it's a pentad. So a total of 5 mid-tone, 2 shadows, 2 highlights usually. Unless it's a really dark color, then you might only do 1 shadow and do 3 highlights, 3 layers of highlight. Or you might, if you were doing a light color, you might end up with like 3 shadows and only 1 highlight. So it varies. But I tend to think that 5 layers, if you're looking for a high quality paint job, 5 layers is about right. And my darkest layer is almost always lining. At least on this scale. I do less lining on big models. 1 second. Yeah, that's true. And they're also probably getting a lot of decent nutrients, like a lot of calcium. Yeah, I mean, it depends, Dwarving. It really depends. But right now, gnolls in D&D are just portrayed as these demonic, mindless servitors of demonkind, and I really hate that. I really hate it. But yeah. Layering is really just putting down the colors and thinning your paint a little bit depending on what you want. When you see like the hard edges here on the pants, that's because of all these little folds are very, very skinny. And I also wanted to suggest a sheen on the pants. So that's why I'm really, but you can see all these little folds are like tiny. When you get that tiny of this much crinkly, you almost have to just do like very hard edges to bring out your details. Whereas when you have a broader surface that's maybe not shiny, like I was wanting her pants to be, then you're going to do more gradual steps. Now, if you have a sharp fold, you are going to get a sharp shadow under it. So it's all about surface. But when you're just starting, Odie, honestly, just probably the most useful thing you can do is just understand placement on shadow and highlight. So I always recommend like maybe working with Zenith, which is a black prime followed by a white spray. And that can kind of tell you where your shadows, you spray the white from above, and it kind of tells you where your shadows should be, where your darker parts should be versus where your lighter parts should be. And that's a good way to start thinking about highlights, because even beyond the colors you're using, as a beginner, a lot of, at least here in the States, and I'm not sure about Canada, but a lot of people will just teach you like colors, highlighting, but they won't teach you about light or about where you should put your shadows. So I think that the Zenith thing helps kind of tell you, hey, darker stuff on the undersides and inside of folds, and make that very dark. And then, where you put more of your highlights is more on the upper surfaces of things. So I think that if you're a beginner, less worry about whether you're blending and more worry about, am I putting my highlights and shadows in the right place? Even if you don't blend great, if your light is reading right, the models you do will look fantastic. And my boyfriend, who's a Crystal Brush award winner, like international award winner, he doesn't have great blending, but his light is freaking spot on and his pieces are amazing. So, and he and I talk a lot about how in America, a lot of people come into this hobby from D&D, or they come into it from gaming figures, and they're taught to put colors on, but they aren't taught anything about color theory or anything really about where to put shadows and highlights. So I always kind of emphasize that a bit. Paint consistency is one of the key things, Dwarving. One of the key things to being, to getting where you want. Hi, RPG Minis and more. Yeah, I know, it's a shame. I mean, the addition is great. I just hate how they treat gnolls. Totally rewriting gnolls for if I run a game. Correct. It does not mix wet, but the point with layering is, like on the back here where you've got this smooth fade, that's layering. And the reason that I get that fade is that I've thinned my paint, so the paint is semi-transparent. And so what you're doing is you're starting from a very transparent brush stroke and you're building up the paint in layers so that it goes from like almost like not there on up to very solid. And then you can build up even lighter colors if you want, which I did here. So layering is like, and actually you probably see it better on here. And it's never a perfect blend with layering. The point is an illusion. So here you can see a dark shadow, really dark shadow here. You can see how I'm bringing up with the Night Sky Indigo. I've got kind of a transition layer there, the indigo, and then indigo plus whatever off-white I chose to use. And it's not a perfect transition if you get really close to it, but nobody's looking at it that close. They're looking at it from here, and from here it looks smooth. So layering does leave you partitions, but the better at paint consistency you get, the better you are at working with thinner paint, the more you can get that flawless blended look. And glazing helps with that too. Glazing is when you kind of put a very thin layer of paint over the top of the whole thing to smooth it out, but that's a more advanced technique. So, but yeah, that's the difference between layering and wet blending. Both things will give you a blend. Layering gives you arguably more control, wet blending gives you a more organic feel. Which PC figure, Shadow Raven? The elf? Yeah, yes, the Lost Prince. Yeah, thanks, Dwarving. It's but so essentially, I guess that's really the difference between wet blending and layering. And there's another difference too. So wet blending is going to give you a more organic feel. It's going to be, if you're good at it, it's going to be a little faster. But I typically actually don't recommend it as a core technique because if you have an aptitude, like give it a try. If you have an aptitude with it and you really enjoy it, run with it. But a lot of people try it and get very frustrated because unless they've got their paint consistency right, or if they're in a really dry climate, they may struggle with it, stuff like that. So it's not necessarily, like you don't need wet blending. It can be very convenient to cultivate, but you don't need it. And the other thing wet blending does is it never gives you that pure highlight and that pure shadow because you're always mixing them together. So you always end up with something in between. And so then if you want to bring back up your pure Night Sky Indigo or your Night Sky Indigo plus white, you really need to like just bring that pure color in and use layering to do that. So layering for precision, layering for purer color, wet blending's faster, more organic, and can allow you to set things up very quickly and to get decent blends off the bat. If that makes sense. RPG minis, if you want good ones, I am a Da Vinci fangirl. I only use really high-end sables in general, except for base coating brushes. Lately, I've been using just a Winsor & Newton professional watercolor, which is a lower grade sable, but, you know, it's good enough. I tend to like sables for everything. I don't like stiff brushes. So Da Vinci Maestro is my go-to, and Raphael is my second go-to. But the Raphael brushes tend to be a bit bigger, so it also depends on what you paint. Because like a size 1 in the Raphael is on the right, and a size 1 in the Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 is on the left. So yeah, if you want a really good brush, and these, I mean, they're expensive. They're going to be, you know, $12 to $18 usually for each, but they also last for years if you take care of them. So it also depends on if you can take care of them and if you can keep them away from your kids, because you do not want to buy a Kolinsky and then have your kids completely ruin them. Those kids would be seriously doing chores if they were in my household as penance for wrecking the brushes. But yeah, because these suckers are going to hold that amazing fine tip you need to do all these details pretty much effortlessly. Da Vinci, yeah. Yeah, I don't use brush soap, actually, Dwarving, but I rinse my brushes a lot, so I find I don't need it. So that depends on kind of your brush habits. Like I got in this habit somewhere. I have no idea why I got into the habit, but I rinse my brushes compulsively, like almost after every brush full of paint. So I find that I just have never needed brush soap. Yeah, that's true. If they're very young, I could give them a pass, but it means you should totally, if you get something good, you should put it up above where they can reach. But yeah, DaVinci Maestro Series 10 size 1 is my go-to, and then I like the Raphael. They have two series, 8408 and 8404. The 8408 has more of a really long taper to it and depends really on your painting style. I don't know if you tend to do more wet blending or if you tend to do more layering type stuff. If you do layering and fine details, I really like the super pointy one, but for everything else, the regular round, which is the 8404, is probably a better series. But the DaVinci Maestro Series 10 size 1 is the brush I use for competition painting for the last 20 years. The quality has always been good. I know exactly one person who has ever had a problem with a DaVinci brush, and they returned it and got a better one. So, yeah, so now everyone knows. Yes, exactly. It's good. No, it's good. I mean, and it's fun, right? And the best thing is you can do it with your kids. Like, we used to add a lot of that at Paint Club. Hey, Sentimental. Oh, also, Sentimental. I want to let you know, because you were an old Paint Clubber. So I'm switching my personal stream, which used to be on Thursdays during the afternoon. I'm going to switch it to Saturdays. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So it'll actually be like probably a 1:30 to 3:30. So it'll be during Paint Club time. Everybody can come to my Twitch and hang out and paint with me. I don't care. We'll just call it Anne's Paint Club. John was threatening to put it up on the store up on the TV in the Reaper store. So if you want to hang out and paint on a Saturday, twitch.tv/paintingbig. It's Pacific time is like 1:30 to 3:30. Reaper time would be 3:30 to 5:30. I guess so. It does slide a little bit. I could start a little earlier. We'll see. We'll see how I feel, but I mean, I could totally slide it a little earlier. I do have some things that I do on Saturdays, but so maybe it'll be a little later than traditional Paint Club then. But still, it's out there. I just want to let you know. And thank you for the shout out, Quindy. Yes, correct, Odie Lodi. You got it. Yeah, because and the reason I do that is because of what I just said about when you're wet blending, you really don't get as dark as this blue actually is because you're constantly mixing it with your indigo. And so you never, unless you really try and can manage to leave some pure color, you're really just getting a lighter kind of toward the indigo and a darker kind of toward the blue, and then you're getting something in the middle. But you're never keeping the pure version of either of these colors when you're wet blending. So if you want a pure darker blue and you want this indigo still to be on the model, you need to come back in with layering on those. Yeah, you add it exactly. And then, like I said, with tiny models, I do like to bring in a really dark shadow. Because I did paint some straight blue down in there, in the crack down there underneath. But I will also do a liner. I sometimes dispense with lining when I'm doing a very large model, like a bust, like Gnoll here. Other Gnoll as we call her. So this Gnoll, she doesn't have really lining. She's just got shading because she's big enough to cast her own shadows. So to do a line on her would be very cartoony. So if I was doing something very comic book with her, which actually I have been kind of working with, playing around with, then I might use hard lining. But otherwise, I'm mostly relying just on darker colors and not lining to set up all of and shadows, just shadows to set up all the different things and differentiate them from each other. But on small models, on 28 millimeter, which is most of, what we're doing with Reaper, I always line. Because I find that it's very useful for getting the details to come out. But yeah, so this Saturday we're going to be down in Carmel shopping for a painting for our wall. Because we have a giant wall that has nothing on it. And it's bugging us. So we're going to go down and look for a painting. Which is super fun. It's totally an Ann and David treat weekend. Plus we get to go to one of our favorite restaurants down there. But then the weekend after, which I think is the 20th, that'll be the first day I'll switch my stream. We won't do it on Thursdays anymore. We'll do it on Saturdays. Yeah, usually Turge and I do give Central Time, but in this case, I slipped. So 3:30 to 5:30 USA Central Time. I try to make the adjustments. Sometimes I accidentally say my Pacific Time. For me, I want it to be in the middle of the afternoon so that I still have like enough time to start cooking and prepping dinner and stuff, and some time to like just kind of detox and hang out. You can do whatever you want, Rings. No, this is not Reaper. Actually, I think there is a smaller version. She's got a smaller version. I think she's done by White Werewolf. And there is a full figure of her, but I don't know what scale it's at. I kind of assume you can get it in 28. But I haven't looked at it because I just wasn't interested. I wanted the bust. But I believe she's like a shaman and she has a staff. In the full version. Don't quote me, but I think so. It's not even close to done, Rings. Oh, there's a 32 and a 75. Thanks, Sentimental. Yeah, I figured usually they do make a smaller version available. Gonna kind of line around where the sash. I'm gonna line around where the sash goes up here. I'm using blue liner. I'm using it pretty strong. I would say about a 5-to-1. Because since I'm working with a dark color on the pants, I want that dark line to be significantly darker. So that we get that hard line right there. To really make the sash stand out from the pants, especially after we start painting it. But yeah, she has a lot of work left to do on her. I have to do a lot more work on her necklace. Is only half done, and all her wraps and the fur, the hair, the dreadlocks are just like, except for like right at the top of the head, they're just kind of blogged in. They're not even close to done. That's a lot of dreadlocks to have to paint. So I've kind of been pushing it off. That, and I've been trying to work more on my commissions and catching up on my commissions. So a lot of my paint time for myself and my paint time for commission work tends to be in the evening, the only time I have left. So in the day. So it's haven't been working on my own projects much. Did a little bit to get Halfling to the point where I could do her base, but that's about it. I have some goals to get some projects done by Christmas. So then I'll have some more time for myself. I kind of want to get the commission work done and out for that reason, that it'll give me more time to paint for me. Because I don't intend to take on such a large commission load again. Because in addition to everything else I do, I really need to not be working like all day and all night. But yeah, then I'll get some work on Gnoll. Getting those dreads done is just a matter of sitting down and putting on some music and just going. Because when you've got something like that that's huge and repetitive on a model, dragon wings are kind of the same way, where you just know it's going to be a slog because they're huge and there's a ton of it. Then it's just you know, got to sit down and just bang it out. Got to do it. And then you feel great once it's done and it looks good. All right. Let's see, got to do the lining back here around the little tail nub, which totally needs more highlights. Get the side of this bag. Yeah, dragons are evil because they're huge and they take a huge time commitment. And a huge energy commitment. That's why I don't buy very many. Although I did get the bust. What was the company that put that out? I don't remember. There was a Kickstarter that I failed my save on. Dracoth's Children, that's what it was. I got the dragon with the little like alien girl. It was a cool piece. And that's actually just a bust, so I only have to deal with part of the dragon on that. I'm trying to be much better about Kickstarters. I had a Kickstarter habit during 2020. It was terrible. Yeah, I fail my save versus Kickstarter periodically. I have managed to resist the recent ones, except for Dungeons and Doggies. I just need to find more time to paint my Dungeons and Doggies that I already have. Because they're just so cute. Alright, I want a dark shadow under this scarf, so I'm going to actually block it in, even in blue liner, and then I'm going to grab some of my dark blue. Now remember, my dark blue is a mixture of blue liner and Ritterlich and a little bit of that indigo, so I've already got a little bit of that blue liner in my dark blue. So I'm just punching down the shadows now, making them a bit stronger. And when I do that, I'm going to make the entirety of the pants shift darker. Because the more area you cover up with shadow, the darker the pants are going to look. But we're getting some nice details coming out here now on the side with the wrinkles and everything. We're getting some really nice shadow and some, you know, even just the indigo is looking like a nice highlight. Part of why I really like that color. It just stands out very nicely. We'll put in a little bit more blue here. And I am going to highlight the indigo as well. And I may decide to actually do it by adding in an off-white that has brown in it instead of gray or gray-brown, which will bring it more into harmony with how brown the Gnoll himself is. It also lets me wash it out. Like I said, I wanted to wash out the bottom of the pants to kind of make them look grayed out, like they've lost their color. And usually the best way to do that is with a gray brown, like Driftwood Brown 9162 or Desert Sand 9432, I think. Yeah, 9432 Desert Sand. I'm probably going to use Desert Sand this time. Yeah, I saw the Magical Academy. Yeah, the Basset Hound Professor. Or was it a Basset Hound or a Golden Retriever? I glanced, said, oh, that's nice, but that one will really depend on the other figures. Because I never, like, guys, I paint 28 for you guys, and I paint 28 for commission, but otherwise, I've stopped painting 28. The Dungeons and Doggies are the only exception I've made. But I just don't enjoy them like I enjoy, like, if I'm going to paint for myself, I want to paint something big. It's all busts, baby. I have some nice 75s as well. 75 millimeter. But my preferences, I mean, there's a reason I called my Patreon Painting Big. Even though I do a lot of painting little, because most of you guys want painting little tips more than you want painting big tips. But that's why I rebranded myself that way, because I do really, really love to paint big stuff. Also, I hope that for that new Kickstarter, they use a better plastic. There are times I've been a little disappointed with the molding on the Dungeons and Doggies stuff. All right, so I'm going to put a shadow here, and the reason is that it's right under this sword. So it's probably going to be a bit of a shadow from that arm, because he's hunched over, right? So see it? So that means there probably is a shadow right here. That's why I say sometimes it pays to figure out shading. Yeah, I have to watch the budget. Being a starving artist, even though you guys support me and keep me going. But I don't want to misuse your funds. Now, the good thing is, since I make my living as a miniatures artist now, I can write off miniature purchases. I tend to be a good Anne and only write it off if I'm going to use it in the course of a tutorial. But I did just buy a bust that I'm probably going to use for a paint along, so that's totally going on my taxes. Yeah, I would like to run a short, like just a short Dungeons and Doggies campaign, like just like, you know, like a month or two just for fun. Korniko at some point in the future. I really feel like it could be a good time. Just as a break, right? Just as a fun little thing. All right, so now I'm just refining. I'm just kind of bringing my blue liner, trying to bring out some shadows in here, trying to define. You can see how the shape of the leg is starting to come out, right? You can really see that there's the big bulge of the muscles here, and you know, you can see the structure, you can see the details. That's what shading is really good at, is bringing out that feeling of weight and mass and bringing out those details. And then as you highlight, you further bring out, like, then you're bringing out details like texture and like the fine details of a thing. But as far as the general feel of a thing, that's almost all shading to suggest the movement and the mass. And the information that highlighting gives you is more like, what kind of cloth is this? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it shiny? Is it dull? And, you know, what are some of the small details that are on there that I might have missed before that highlights can accentuate? Hello, Reaper John. Hello, TARDIS Chick. Nice to meet you. I'm Anne. I work for Reaper, obviously. All right, so we've shaded Gnolly, the small Gnolly, and I'm to highlighting now. And I've definitely shifted the cloth more toward blue. I've shifted it more dark. Notice that since I shifted it darker, guys, doesn't it look better with him? Like, it's looking much better and more harmonious with our Gnoll. So that's good. So our next thing will be to kind of gray it out a little bit so that it's muted more like him. And we haven't done stripes yet, and that's purposeful. I'm going to do everything else because I want to be able to highlight this before I put the stripes on. I did the same thing, if you remember, with Julianne the Herbalist when we did stripes on her dress. I want to get at least a basic highlight, shadow, and midtone down before I put the stripes in. And I'll probably will put the stripes in even with Desert Sand, I think, if I go with lighter stripes. Trying to think about if I want lighter stripes. Okay, so lighter stripes. The disadvantage of lighter stripes is that lighter stripes are going to pull the eye down. So maybe we want to go with black stripes instead. And if I'm going to do black stripes, that means I want to highlight up pretty well on these pants to make those stripes stand out. Stripes are always freehand, and so stripy pants are always tempting, especially on pirates, but you can get into trouble there if the pants suddenly stand out more than the rest of the figure. So you've got to keep that in mind if you're going to do stripes. So I may end up going dark stripes, and we'll find out after I do this highlight and after I kind of fade out the bottom of the pants a bit. Then we will decide. I need my night sky. We can at least get our highlights done this time, and then we can put stripes on our list for the next stream with the Gnoll. I'm going to do 3 drops of night sky. I'm going to try 1 drop of desert sand and see how much that impacts it. Striping pants. Yeah, sorry. I talked fast and lost my enunciation. So if I do the indigo and I put 1 drop of the desert sand in, which is pretty much an off-white. But the fact that it has yellow in it is going to, and brown, is going to mute the purple here. It's going to mean it's not going to be as bright, which is what I want, because this guy is not taking care of his pants. So from doing that, I get a lighter, muted out, still really, really pretty, actually. Pretty kind of grayed out violet. This is actually a color that's a lot like, do you guys remember the violet triad from like Sunset? It was later in the Master Series line. I think they got canceled. But this was a lot like that. Alrighty. The problem with blue purples is that a lot of people aren't sure what to do with them, so when I put them in the line, they tended not to sell great, and so they would keep getting canceled. And I kept trying, because I really love indigos, and I love blue violets, and so I kept trying, and I kept putting them out, and hoping they would resonate. So this is kind of cool. This gives us a very faded highlight, which is what I was hoping for. Let's get down here. So there's my highlight going on over the knee. It's a good area to kind of test out. And it's fading. See how faded that color is. So it's really doing a good job of fading the purple. And that's what I want. So I'm going to apply it to the bottom of the pants here. Not going to paint over my shadows, but the bottoms here tend to kind of catch the light because they curl outward, and generally it's a thing. So I can get away with that. And you want this to kind of blend in, because really this sort of thing would happen gradually. So you definitely would see a fade into kind of a tan, beige, gray mass that the cloth had just got, the color has been beaten and leached out of it over time, especially with exposure to seawater and stuff like that. And whether these pants look dull or shiny is going to depend on how high we take the highlights. So we have to keep that in mind. I would like these pants to stay more dull. I don't want to really draw the eye. I missed a flash line or a mold line. Hello, Maharoon. Long time no see. Yes, thank you for the raid. Yes, I love indigo. I do love indigo. All right, so I missed a little bit of flash line here, so I'm going to just take my knife and take it off because it's annoying me. Now that I'm getting a nice finish on these pants, I want to correct it while I still can. So I'm just going to take it off. And since it's blank bones material with no mold release on it or anything, it's easy to take my midtone and paint over it. Yes, we are painting a pirate Gnoll with snazzier pants than he deserves. And we are trying to make that color work with his very browned out fur. So I'm using some brown to build highlights, some desert sand, to kind of try to wash out that color until it works well with his fur. And we'll see how it works. I may need to darken down the whole thing, but we're also going to add dark stripes to the pants in a future stream. And that will definitely break up this indigo, so it'll make it work a little bit better with his fur. So this is a constant back and forth to try to make these colors, like figure out how can I make these colors work well together. They're the correct selections. Oh, and the reason he has two off-colored paws, by the way, is that originally I painted both of them and asked people to choose what color they wanted his whole body to be, and we just haven't gone back to touch up this paw. So he has one very green gangrenous paw, and that will be corrected. We'll stick the dock on him, the ship's vet, and get the gangrenous paw taken care of at some point. Probably when I mix up colors to do the rest of the fur here. But I felt like painting pants today, so sometimes you just got to go with the mood. I kind of painted over my shadow there, so I'm going to put it back in. There we are. There. So darker shadow, because under that arm you would have one, because you can see that he slouches over there. Alrighty. I could probably put a little bit more of that blue in here. I didn't get much of it in. So the fact that I'm keeping all my colors open and I'm working back and forth, and whenever I'm like, okay, I went a little bit too far in one direction, I need to correct, and I can just do it because I've got all these colors mixed and they've stayed wet because I'm using a well palette, and I have added a little bit of water to the ones that need it over time. So I've been able to keep these. Also, it's cooler out now and damp here today, so that is helping my well palette function as intended. And this is pure layering at this point. I am using a layering brush stroke, so I'm starting my brush stroke away from the area where I want to build up highlights, and I'm pulling back toward that area. And with little tiny fold bits, I'll just do a little sharp highlight because you don't have a lot of room to blend here. So just like the pants on my halfling that I was showing earlier, when you've got little tiny tight folds, you don't have a lot of room to do any blending. Just make the highlight and move on. Whereas when you've got a bigger fold or a bigger, broader surface here, then you can play with your layering brush stroke and blend things a bit more. Like so. So bringing out those folds, putting the highlights there, and then I gotta bring up the bottom of these pants so that I can fade them out. Not really gonna touch my shadows, but I'm gonna try to make enough room to suggest the fade here. And what we can do if we want these shadows to go brown, if we're really going to brown out the bottom of these pants, is actually we can start by layering or glazing some shield brown, like a darker brown. Instead of going straight to the desert sand, we can start with a brown and put a glaze over this and knock all of these colors more toward the brown side of things. And I'm going to kind of ignore, when it gets toward the middle of the leg, between the legs, there's going to be shadows. So I'm going to mostly ignore those areas. Just going to get this area here. That area here. There. So that's a nice set of highlights. I need to do the center. But now this has brought it lighter again, and now the pants aren't looking as good against him. Can you see? When that happens, when you're like, okay, I'm going to put a lot of shadows on these pants and knock them darker and hope they work better with the fur. And hey, okay, that worked. Great. But then you highlight and the pants suddenly look lighter, and then they aren't working as well with the skin tone or fur tone that you've used. Then you know that you're right. You know that they need to go darker. Like, that's the answer, and you should double down on that. So I'm going to finish these highlights, but then I'm probably going to glaze the entire pants area with my Ritterlich blue, which is going to take everything a little more blue, and it's also going to take everything a bit darker. And if I really want to be effective with that, I actually would build another highlight first before I did that. Do I have time? Yeah, I might. Because when you put that glaze down, it's going to knock everything down. So if you don't want to have to highlight over the top of that again, do a brighter highlight than your next highlight up. Do a brighter highlight, and then you can afford to knock it down. It'll still be fairly bright. It's kind of overcompensating at that point for the fact that you know you're going to be taking it darker. So I'm going to grab a couple of brushfuls of this soft, kind of grayed out muted indigo that I've built. And I'm going to add another drop of desert sand, which is going to take it quite light. And it's really going to start muting it out and taking it into a kind of a gray mauve kind of color. But because we've built that up gradually, we still have a decent triad here. Well, this is a decent triad, and then we've actually got a pentad at this point, which is what we originally wanted, was to have 2 highlights and 2 shadows. But yeah, the reason that I would do this highlight first before I glazed is that when you glaze, you're putting one color over everything, and unless that color is your midtone, it can be kind of hard to highlight after that or shade after that. We won't have trouble shading because we're going to be using our shadow color to glaze. But making these highlights work against a color that is now bluer than it originally was can be a bit difficult sometimes, more challenging. So keep that in mind. Now, again, when you have a tiny fold like this where there's really no room to blend it, just use a line. Use a line to get it. You know you're going to be glazing, so you know you're going to get a chance to blend that in when you glaze. Also, since there's more white in this color, I need to add more water to it in order to make it blend really well. I want them to be faded because they've obviously been ripped up and really beaten up. And he has not taken great care of them. And any dye is going to fade subjected to that sort of abuse over time, especially when he's like walking through seawater and stuff like that. Salt water is really, really hard on stuff. So I'm going to bring that up more, and then we'll glaze the whole thing. And with every level of highlighting, it goes faster and faster because you're doing less and less, because you're shrinking your highlight every single time and making it smaller. And so as you go up in highlights, your process just gets faster and faster because you're not doing as much. With every layer, you're just doing little touches. So bringing this way up, much, much higher than I originally wanted it, because I know I'm going to knock it down. And I'm almost to the point where I can do that. All right. Now notice as I bring up this highlight on these pants, they start to look kind of shimmery. They kind of look a little bit more shiny in texture. And that is that's what happens when you take your highlights up a lot and your shadows are still dark. Things start to look shiny. All right, just wanted to block in the shadow a little bit more because it's right up there at the top. All right, now let's hit it with a glaze, and that'll be the last thing we do. All right, so these pants have gotten too light and too bright, and they need some help in the opposite directions. So I'm going to grab my dark blue, that color right there, And I'm going to drop a lot of water into it. It's already thinned. So at least 1 drop of water, and I'll mix it. Blues tend to be a little bit more transparent, so you want to be more cautious with how much water you put in at first to make sure. But look at how dark this still is on the side of the palette. That's going to really knock those pants down. I think I want just a little bit more water, and I'm not going to add a full drop. I'm just going to add a little bit on the end of my brush. That's where this well palette is really nice, because with the white ceramic, you can really, if you just give it a minute, you can really see how transparent or not transparent this will be once you apply it to this pants. The amount of coloration you're seeing on the side of the palette is how hard it's going to hit this purple when I apply it. That, I do want to knock it down, so I don't want it to be too thin. If I was trying to just shift the color closer to blue, then I would thin this more, because I would want just a little bit of a color shift. But because I want to actually make it darker, I'm going to leave it stronger than I would have if I just wanted to shift the color. So I'm going to grab my mixing brush to do this glaze. It's a bigger brush. It's going to hold a lot of paint. We want a lot of paint. We want to cover all the surface as fast as we can. And then we want to wick off the excess. So adding more paint is far better, unless you're doing a spot glaze on one tiny area, which I also do on occasion. But adding a ton off the bat is much better for you in the long run. And once you start, you're committed, so just go for it. Boom, boom. All right, we've gotten all of our surface covered. The pants have gone very blue now. Now we really need to take our brush and come back. You can see how much that color really impacted everything. And I may have screwed myself up because I may need to go back and re-highlight. But we'll see. Now we have to wait for it to dry. Gotten all my puddles off. Don't want to leave any puddles. There's still a little bit of room too before it dries. If you want to pull some of the blue off, you can grab a damp brush and pull that glaze off of areas that you kind of want to preserve more of a purple. So if you think you've gone too far, come back in quick. Add in some water and pull some of that blue off. You can absolutely do that. You need to do it before things dry. Otherwise, things are going to start to skin up and you're going to leave brush strokes. And there comes a point when you're just like, okay, brush is down, must leave it. And don't judge it right out the bat. You have to wait, because every wash or glaze is going to dry a lot lighter, a lot less impactful than you think it is. So even though it looked really blue when you put it on, as it dries, we're seeing that indigo come back. We've shifted the pants a level darker. We've brought in a lot more blue. When you start seeing something, when you've got an area go dull, TARDIS, when an area has gone dull, you know it's dried. And then you just take it right off. You got to just go no. And if you see that your paint is just at a really thin film all over everything, like that's the moment before things start to dry. So you either have to be super fast if you're going to do what I just did to pull off color, or just stop and wait it out. But the minute you see a spot of dullness is when you know that paint has dried there, and that's when you've got to stop messing around with things. Because then that's the rest of it's going to follow soon after. So that's not bad, but the thing that did, that actually worked against us, is that Ritterlich Blue is still pretty vibrant blue, right? It's got a nice, rich color to it. And even though this one had blue liner in it, this is still a pretty intense blue. So what this did is it did bring our pants darker, which is to our advantage, but it also took our muted quality right out and made it more vibrant again. So what I'll need to do is probably glaze with a dark brown next time to take things down and really make it look good with the Gnoll, which is good because it'll knock the pants darker again. Maybe I'll use a medium brown like Shield. We'll work with it. But this is better, and so we're pushing it. And this is how I work. Like, this is not, like, you should never feel like if you have to mess with your color, you made a mistake. Like, all of us do this. All of us put down a color and then we have to adjust it because it's not quite working right. And so some people will just paint over it with an entirely different option, and that's a win too. But you could also just mess with it. Say, no, I know this can work. I've got to troubleshoot it. And it's the process of troubleshooting it that teaches you color theory foo, to the point where you don't even have to think. You know exactly what you need to do to correct it. So doing this stuff is not a fail. It's actually the best thing you can do in your painting development, to stop and think and have to troubleshoot stuff. Don't do it yourself, and ask for help if you need it, but try to do it yourself first. And then chances are when you do ask for help and somebody says, oh yeah, do this, you'll have done enough thinking on it to see instantly, oh yeah, that's going to work because this didn't work. And this is, another thing in the opposite direction. So you've got to troubleshoot to learn. You've got to make mistakes to learn. Alrighty, so it is time to end the stream. Tomorrow we're going to be working on Ye Old Ogre. We're going to finally get to highlights because I think his skin tone has come out to the point that I really like. So we're going to work on bringing in some natural skin tones to highlight him up. Yeah, he's looking a lot better. And maybe even punch his shadows down another level to make it really dramatic. But we'll put the highlights on first and we'll see what is working. So we're working with this ogre skin tone, with non-human skin tones tomorrow. And that is the deal, everybody. Today on Gnoll, we worked on his pants. We talked a lot about color theory. So if you're coming in recently onto this stream and you're interested in color theory and using the color wheel and how to apply it to miniatures, go back and watch the VOD on this sucker, or catch it on YouTube after it goes up there after a while. Either way, we talked a lot of color theory today. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you had a great time. And I will be back tomorrow to paint an ogre for you. All right? And those of you who no crow's nests this afternoon? All right. Yes. And go bake cookies. Go bake your first set of autumn cookies. That's my commandment. Have fun, everybody.